Hello, I'm Richard Brent, the editor-in-chief of Briefing magazine for smarter legal business management. And as our readers, who are law firm leaders in all departments of the law firm, look to a potential fresh wave of change on the other side of 2 years of it that have already changed so much for so many, today I'm talking to two more leaders at businesses that are poised to help them to do just that. Intapp, which became a publicly traded company at the end of June, offers multiple solutions for law firms, from matter intake and conflicts management to pricing, marketing, and business development, all within a single cloud platform. And I'm joined by Pat Archbold, who is the Vice President and Industry Group Leader for Legal at Intapp, and also Josh Clark, who's the Vice President of Sales Engineering at Intapp, to discuss how firms might go about becoming more fully and productively connected as businesses, as they look to the challenges ahead. So I'm going to start with Pat, if that's all right. Pat, why do you think that law firms have historically failed or struggled to create an organization that is as connected as it needs to be?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I would say it comes down to two things. The departmental method in which firms have grown historically and their incentive plans. And by that, I mean, if you think about how law firms have grown, they added a marketing department, they added business development. They've really grown in that matter, and they've procured technology in a similar fashion. So they go out and buy a CRM tool, they go out and buy a finance tool, but they haven't really invested in connecting those different sets of information, and they've been looked at as independent pockets of data used for a specific purpose, as opposed to in aggregate the power of that data. And so I think they're missing some opportunities there. They're definitely moving that direction, but I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of firms to overcome. I also think when you think about the incentive plans, most of the firms are focused on individual performance, not so much at the firm level. So there isn't the incentive to do the types of sharing of data and the work it takes to keep that data up to speed. If you think about, it's basically a free agent market. Lawyers are moving around all the time. And so they're focused on their little pocket of data, which makes it really hard to really leverage that, across the firm. I think also the fact that the profits are distributed annually. Hard to tell a millionaire to do his job differently or his or her job differently. And so, things like taxonomy and data are long-term projects, and they need sustained attention. And so I think the market's getting there, but it's definitely still maturing.
Mm-hmm. And what are the best examples that you can give of how changing the current situation with approach to technology, in terms of approach to technology, how that could measurably transform the strategic or financial success of the firms who are listening to this now? Josh.
Oh yeah, maybe I can jump in there. First, it's a pleasure to be here, Richard. Thanks for the invitation.
No problem. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, I'll touch on an old topic, and we're certainly seeing it from a different perspective here, and that's CRM. And that might get some people to run away, but if you'll be patient, I think there's a light at the end of this conversation about CRM. I think it's useful to take a look at this not as the traditional view, which is still very important. You still need to manage lists and run events and do surveys, and those are very critical things, and there are some firms who do that much better than others. But I think if you look at it from another lens of client development and a couple of key perspectives there that are going to be really important as we enter into this new way of working. And two categories of client development that I think are important. One is understanding where you can have better coverage of either your key client or the client that you're working with. And the second is just managing that relationship overall. And so you can see this is shifting from the services you can do for marketing over to developing that client and that relationship. The implication that I have about client development, I think, falls into one area that we've seen a trend in. It's not really a new trend, but a greater emphasis, and that's the emphasis of firms focusing their strategic plans and their energies for development into industry. And like I said, it's not new, but a greater emphasis in this area, and firms are looking to operationalize this. That is, not just put industry on the website to make it clear what industries they hope to cover, but actually focus teams, business development, and how they pursue business around key industries. And when you're talking about key industries, you can't really talk about key industries without also talking about key clients, because industries, of course, are made up of clients that are focused in those industries. The traditional approach of looking at that, it typically is based on revenue. We have a lot of revenue in this industry, so that's our key industry. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be a key industry, but what leading firms are doing is they're looking at where the opportunities lie with the expertise and the experience that they have on staff relative to where they can explore other industries, right? So adjacent industries. And one great example of this coverage that I mentioned in client development, one firm had clients, covered industry, the real estate industry, and also covered healthcare. And then they realized, wait a minute, our real estate clients, or many of them, are converting old shopping malls into health centers. So, getting closer to the consumer. And while doing this, they realized if we overlay our experience in healthcare with real estate, there's a different level and a different type of expertise that we can bring to our real estate clients. And that's very different, right? You wouldn't think about converting those two, but by looking at what's happening in the industry, they were able to bring a level of expertise and expand their business in that particular market. So I think that's a great way to look at not just where you have current revenue, but where those white spaces or opportunities may lie. The other area that I mentioned about relationship management, a lot of firms think about, how strong are my relationship? Who has those contacts? Well, if you apply better technology and more advanced technology, you can let that do the work for you. It can analyze your email, analyze your interactions, et cetera, in a way that's confidential and secure, and would actually recommend to you who has the best relationship with certain people at your particular client. This can become very useful, you can imagine, in pitches and proposals, even just with client development in your quarterly meetings, et cetera. But it doesn't just stop there, right? If you just looked at that, then it gives you a little bit of insight, but you need to be armed with a little bit more. And so what we're seeing firms do is they're pulling in other more salient information, such as news about the client, relevant news about the matter associated with that you're working on in the client, statuses of open opportunities, statuses of matters, statuses of time and billing, et cetera. And so anytime you then either pick up the phone or are on your way to visit a client or have that conversation, your ability to make an influence and seek out other opportunities with the client is much stronger than it was before. So the traditional view of just taking the static CRM, this is what it does, and applying it more to, hey, how do we do client development a lot more progressively? We're seeing that as a real strategic shift for firms.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Josh. And this year, as of 2021, Intapp is selling cloud-based solutions only, I read. So why do firms need to invest in the cloud specifically to thrive in the fashion that you've just outlined, Josh?
Yeah, one distinction that I want to make is firms need to invest in getting to the cloud. They don't need to not necessarily invest in the cloud. So, all firms have been in business for a long time and have put in a lot of technology, and it's been around for a while. So it takes a bit of effort sometimes to move that over to the cloud. But once you do move to the cloud, costs erode with the reduction in complexity. And that's just what we see across the firms that we work with. And that's very important to understand. There's a lot of infrastructure cost, resource costs, and then the integration costs and complexity associated with managing your own environment. It can be very bespoke, but bespoke comes at a cost of complexity, and especially in the way that we operate and run today. As an example, one of the firms that we were working with had an industry strategy, wanted to develop a larger focus on industry teams, but in order to do that, recognize the need to integrate their intake process along with their client development. And when you're doing that, you get the benefit of understanding, early warning signs of conflicts of business with what you're pursuing, and even potentially guiding client development into areas that are more profitable, and then helping the firm avoid those pitfalls of doing business that lock them out of a more profitable business or larger business that they're actually pursuing. Even looking up keywords as an example, focusing on this particular area such as 5G or other areas, and anything dealing with that would guide a deeper review of that. Anyway, so as an example of seeking out more development in the industry, they have to move their risk platform, conflicts platform to the cloud to get that level of clarity and insight with corporate tree integration, et cetera. That's going to take 18 months to go do that. And so there is an effort to go make that happen, but the benefits can surely outweigh the effort. Yeah, the point about the effort there and moving to the cloud that I think is really important for firms to understand also is, our observation is that the legal industry is a little bit, some would argue a lot, behind other industries in the adoption of cloud. Sometimes I wonder, are we really still having this conversation about security? But we are, and that conversation needs to happen firm by firm as they have their history. But because it's been proven in a very secure way, such as the financial services industry, right? We all do our banking online, and we're all very comfortable that that's very secure. This means that progressive firms that move to the cloud faster can really leapfrog the competition in terms of integrating their data and getting the advantages of having that environment.
Okay. And to what extent have you found that those firms, firms in general, actually are focused on that to improve their operations? And if you think there is a significant change going ahead now, what's sort of driving that?
Yeah. As Josh sort of points out, I don't think it's the cloud that improves the firm, but the cloud is an enabler to run your firm better. And so, a good example of that is a firm we work with, a large, very well-respected firm at the executive level made a decision. We're hiring data scientists and invest a significant amount of money bringing in these data scientists, only for them to come into the firm and find out they can't get at the data they need to get at to actually make good decisions for the firm. So they waste their time pulling together the data. The cloud enables you to do that much faster. It allows a much integrated, more productive data management strategy. And so, that's a real push for that. I think, earlier I mentioned the free agency, the lateral movement that's taking place. And, Clifford Chance can now hire somebody in Bulgaria. They couldn't do that before. They hired in their major centers. Cravath can hire an associate in Topeka, Kansas. These people can work from anywhere, and the cloud enables that ability for firms to go chase talent where they need to chase the talent, and that's really driving them. And if you think about the younger associates, they grew up with an answer to every question they want in their pocket. They ask Google anything they want and they get the answer immediately, and then they come to a firm and it takes them 2 weeks to get an answer to a question. They're not going to stick around, right? So I think leadership of firms really need to think about that as the chase for talent continues to heat up. They have expectations, their clients have expectations, right? The corporate world has gone through this digital transformation already, and they expect their law firms to be able to do the same things that they can do internally. And I don't think that's the case today. It's getting there. Firms are definitely moving there, but they have expectations. We hear a lot things like clients expecting, Teams collaborate. I should have a Microsoft Teams set up, and your lawyers should be able to work with me. And COVID has definitely driven that, but that's definitely I think there's a big push for firms to get on board, and it's happening, but it's going to take time.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe just one aspect of what firms can do with your cloud, with Intapp's cloud. I read that it offers to reduce administrivia, and I quite liked that particular phrase. So where do you see most sort of opportunity or space for firms to cut out the inefficiency that still lies within their systems with, for example, automation? Let's go with Josh for that.
I would say in the area of one topic that comes to mind is in billing and collections. Client billing guidelines, they need to be a native part of the lawyering process. When I enter time, I should know what I can or cannot bill for. I should know the rate. I should know who can work on the engagement, what the client is willing to pay for, what the terms are, the agreements that we have for the client, et cetera. What we find is that when it comes to integrating this knowledge in the way that we work and in the systems that we work in, this is a big area. This is a big gap for law firms. A lot of times, those agreements and those understandings, they're documented well, and unfortunately, those documents are stored in a document management system. And in order to find that information, I have to be very proactive about that. And before I either enter my time or as I'm looking at pre-bills, I have to go either find those documents, or even some firms have an entire team set up to support firms in reviewing those pre-bills in order to better understand where they have gotchas before the bills are submitted. There's a lot of capabilities in the integration of technology to support that and reduction of the administration. A lot of complaints that we hear about, why wasn't this understood before time was entered, and why am I spending so much time reviewing pre-bills before they're submitted? And then, of course, the downstream effect of that is not just the administrative burden on the lawyers, but also in the reduced capture of experience related to those matters that can be leveraged for client development later on. So it's more than just the administrivia that is a challenge, but also the impact of the firm long term. Okay, yeah.
Pat, you mentioned artificial intelligence earlier. What's the biggest role for AI to play in the connected firm of the future?
Yeah, I think the firms that really invest in the infrastructure to bring it together can leverage it in some very unique ways. So, for example, is this client likely to leave based on the patterns of what other clients that have left have done? Is this a risk that this client is not coming back? Is there a risk that this partner might be departing based on the activities that are going on? Are there signals I can read from the data that tell me this might be a lateral defection? Those are, I think, some of the very tactical insights that can be delivered from the data. The other thing that we're investing heavily in right now is this, it's based around this nudge theory, the ability to push information to lawyers, very selected information as to what they could be doing. Hey, did you know that Josh has a tight connection with Peter at this company, and there's an opportunity for us to do business based on the types of business we've done in that industry? Is hugely powerful. I know that Josh has a meeting tomorrow morning with XYZ company. When Josh wakes up, he's going to have a little summary that everything's happened. Where are the engagements? What marketing events have they attended? What are the insights from the company and the third-party data? So I think there's a huge opportunity to deliver that information. Those AI is really just insights from data. I mean, and how do I deliver that in context, which is why we've been so focused on this industry, just understanding how lawyers think, live, eat, and breathe every day so that we can push them information that helps them do their job better. And I think it's really as simple as that.
Okay, yeah. And then looking to the next wave of change, though, that may be coming our way to how professionals operate and collaborate, longer term remote working or hybrid working. and sort of, the checks and balances that are involved there. Where do you think that will introduce the most significant challenges to operate more effectively, productively, or meaningfully? And how is Intapp sort of exploring how it might help firms to meet those challenges?
Maybe
Josh?
I can address this. Yeah, maybe I can address this one. Thank you, Richard. Well, I think people who listen to that, they are I would assume most are acknowledging the type of change, and I think this meeting itself is quite evidence of that. At a different time and age, Pat and I would give up a lot to have the opportunity to be in London to do this directly, right? And instead of over Zoom, and it's the nature of how we operate. I'm not quite sure what the ratio of the hybrid environment is going forward, but it's the new normal will certainly not be the old normal by a long shot. And I'd like to put a little perspective on that before I dig in deeper on that, Richard. So, of course, COVID has a big deal impact on this, but the way we've been hearing from our firms is that, excuse me, COVID is an accelerant. It's not the only factor. So as Pat was mentioning about firms hiring resources in other parts of either the nation or other geographies entirely, the idea of having practices that span geographies and national practices and/or client teams that are span the world as does the client itself. That's not new, but the idea of coverage is something that the firms are taking more to heart. And so hiring people based on your real estate, as an example, hiring lawyers based on your real estate is no longer inhibited. Now it's hire the best attorney that can still provide this service. Well, that takes you out of that real estate location, which has an implication on real estate strategy itself and the investments that are made there, but also the teams there. And so COVID has been an accelerant to practices and views such as that. There's also the idea of rate arbitrage or rate balancing, right? Having resources in different locations that can do similar work at a premium value that can manage your balancing of resources on the matter. There's also the accelerants that are happening with technology itself, which is more controlled data transparency across the firm, right? So while some things should certainly be under greater scrutiny, a lot more data is being exposed just to the nature of the adoption and evolution of technology. And I already went through the industry and client collaborations, et cetera. So it's more than COVID. It's just a change, more than a sea change going across firms in this hybrid environment. And that new normal is going to be much more than what we expect. So I'd like to put some perspective on that in that hybrid environment. It's not generically, but I think if you look at it from a number of use cases, as an example, when you have this distributed environment, whether in the office, across offices, and whether that office is in somebody's home, think about what teams need to do in proposal collaboration, in client collaboration, collaborating with the client directly, and collaborating on matters, collaborating on client teams, collaborating on time and billing, and resolution. So everybody is a part of some team in general, right? And those are examples of teams. You're not in one of those teams, you're in multiple of those teams. And so every one of those requires allocation of the right people with the right access to the right documents, to the right applications with the right access to those applications. And you can't ask a lawyer or a partner to go do that provisioning and figure that out. And what happens instead is they have a world of links and a world of all this confusion and chaos in trying to manage that. And we see Microsoft Teams being a major player in providing clarity to all of that chaos. We're all a part of that chaos right now, but if you can get an environment where now you're explicitly a part of that team, where those teams are set up during the intake process, where those teams are set up during the proposal process, in the matter management process, then it naturally happens that the right people with the right access to the right documents and the right applications are in that virtual team. And if I'm working from my home office or in the city office, that virtual environment is very important because no matter who's working on it, I have access to them. I can chat with them. I can see what they've been working on, and I can track that activity as if they're sitting right here in the bullpen with me together. So that hybrid environment is something that isn't going away. It's going to be a part of the new normal. And that's one of the reasons that, or the big reason why Intapp made the investment in acquiring RepStore, which helps provide a lot of that, or does provide a lot of that clarity to a Microsoft Teams environment. And as you know, Office and Microsoft Word is pretty much the desktop of attorneys.
And a final question on the theme of connection: how is Intapp effectively connecting with its own clients, customers, to understand their views on the sorts of questions that we've been asking today? Pat.
Yeah, so we have, like most technology companies, we have advisory boards. We have CFO, COO, managing partner advisory boards. They're really focused on what we think. The way we think about advisory boards is, it isn't a chance for us to talk, it's for us to listen. And so it's really about their business, trying to understand where the market is headed to get ahead of it. And the thing we hear over and over is firms are bringing in people from outside the market, from other corporate, environments, to give insights. And those people, when they sit in our advisory boards, sort of expect this connected. Every other industry has some sort of an industry cloud, your SAPs, your Oracles. They're not tailored to the legal industry. And so these people come in and say, what's the equivalent here? Why isn't this connected? Nobody argues that having a connected firm is a good idea. They just don't know where to start. It's a big hill to climb. And so trying to understand where to start. And so one of the things we've been working on for quite some time is this concept of a connected firm power index. So we analyzed the entire life cycle of an engagement. We broke down its pieces to its simplest components and its 14 processes, from setting strategy to sending a bill that's going to get paid and everything in between. We've got a 5-point maturity scale for that. So when we sit down with a firm, it's not just, hey, do you want to buy a new CRM? That's not going to change the business. What's going to change the business is, how do I go to market in this particular industry for these particular services? And that power index helps to lay that out, where the firm needs to improve to meet their strategic objectives. And we align that directly with a firm's strategic plan to say, you said you wanted to be here. Here's the 3 processes that we think will help you get there and how you need to improve. And let's embark on a 3-year journey to get there. And we're going to renew that every year. And we're going to go attack that in line with your strategic plan, as opposed to a technology focused, go replace system A only to execute the project flawlessly and find that it does nothing to help the firm meet its strategic objectives. So let's think about the strategic plan first, the processes that need improving second, and the technology really is just an enabler. And so that's how we're really trying to transform the company to really work very closely with our clients and put the supporting infrastructure there to ensure that they actually meet those goals. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to stand up at the end of the project and say, we helped you achieve your strategic plan. If we do that, everybody's going to win.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Pat. Well, I think if firms are unsure or actively considering where they do need to start, you've certainly shared plenty of perspective there for that thinking. So thank you very much, Pat Archbold and Josh Clark. Thank you for talking to me and to Briefing's readers today.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard.
Good day.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.